Good morning, sir. Good morning for the very nice introduction, and good morning to all participants. With a note of gratitude for the opportunity given to me to speak in this forum, I would like to start. Um, Before starting, I would like to just tell a few words. I see very many learned professors and theorists in this forum, and my own fellow colleagues who are experts in theory are there. And I would like to welcome you all. In fact, if you feel that I go anywhere debating, because my specialization is not theory, my specialization is ELT and ICT. And I also started my learning theory and other things after joining Arts and Science College. So I'm a learner. I would like to call myself a learner all the time. So if you feel that I'm deviating anywhere, I welcome you all to correct me. I would like to stand corrected. With that note, I would like to get started with today's work. And I would like to share my screen now. Hope my screen is seen. Professor, do you see my screen? Hello?
We can, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I continue from there. The topic of today's lecture is emerging research in English literature. So when we see literature, we cannot say deviate literature, or we cannot say that life is something different from literature. We see the entire world in literature. We see life in literature. We say literature mirrors life. So when we say literature mirrors life, naturally, I would like to give a quote before I get started with. The unexamined life is not worth living. When we say life is reflected in literature or literature mirrors life, it needs a kind of examination. Socrates said this during his trial. I think it is 399 BC when he was found or accused for being guilty for impiety and promoting youth to ask questions. This was during his trial, he makes this dialogue. And this is being given in Plato's Apology of Socrates. So, unexamined life is not worth living is a very famous statement, and that really gave me a hint and a clue for to proceed with today's lecture. So, a life has to be examined, otherwise it is not worth living, according to Socrates. That means literature and life, I don't see it as two different entities. We see literature and life, and whatever we see in literature, that is also there in the society, that is there in the political sector, that is seen in the agriculture sector, that is seen in the educational sector. So whatever you see in literature, that is seen even in the medical sector. So whatever you see in literature, that is also getting reflected into all the facets of the entire world. So we need an examination there. The word examination here gives me a clue of making an analysis, an exploration, a kind of investigation into the entire life. So here, let me take the life as literature. So when we speak of literature, Socrates, I would like to quote Socrates once again: the disciplined practice of thoughtful questioning enables the scholar or a student to examine ideas and be able to determine the validity of those ideas. This is what is being told. In fact, literally an invigorating statement for research scholars today in literature. So it is a kind of a disciplined practice of thoughtful questioning. So I again emphasize the phrase disciplined practice of thoughtful questioning. So there is a kind of a strategy that we follow in a research. So there is a system in a research. So it is a system of practice of a thoughtful questioning. So we should have a capacity to probe into a system, an existing system, or whatever hypothesis you frame. So you go by your research very systematically. So this enables a scholar to examine ideas and be able to determine the validity of those ideas. So what is the thing we read there? What is the information we read there? We understand, we determine the validity of those ideas. It may be the existing ideas, or you may arrive at some other ideas. So it is based on the hypothesis of your research. So with that, let us see research in literature. I see research and literature under these points. So literature research helps to explore the untrodden facets of subjects. It provides, when I say helps to explore the untrodden facets of a subject. Recently, I came across one of the researches and a thesis that came for a review that spoke very well on the psychotherapeutic value of the Shakespearean hymns and sonnets in the dramas of Shakespeare. So when you talk about the therapeutic, psychotherapeutic value of, or the impact of, psychotherapeutic impact of Shakespearean hymns in his drama, naturally it is something you cannot say that Shakespeare's many people have worked on already, and what is there for me to work on that? There are very many scholars, there are bards on Shakespeare, you can say, but still there are people who are exploring Shakespeare, still there are people who are working on classical writers. So everywhere there is an opportunity for exploration, especially the untrodden, untouched facets of the subject are still there, and we have to fix where it is and how we are going to go about it. Then second point, provides a platform to gain authenticity over certain observations. So, a research in literature, it should give you a platform. It should give you an arena to gain authenticity over certain observations. Take T.C. Boyle, for example. So, T.C. Boyle, many would have worked on T.C. Boyle as environmentalist, and eco-critical perspectives people would have gone. So, would have worked on. There are people who are working on climatic studies on the works of T.C. Boyle. People could also work on different aspects, like you can compare, you can take a theory and go by a methodical research, and you can connect it with the observations, and you can also do a kind of a medical research in T.C. Boyle, and you can complement it very well with the observations that you find out, and you can talk about it. So you need not always think that there are only this particular focus, only with that focus I have to deviate. When you say eco-criticism itself, you speak about ecofeminism, you speak about environmental justice as a facet. In fact, even in T.C. Boyle, you can work on the environmental justice aspect of the works that are presented there, or the literature, the information found in T.C. Boyle's literature you can work on. So when you, and the third point of which I would like to mention here is foresee. This research in literature foresees an issue and helps to address it timely. So it should have like sometimes certain researchers it foresees. Here I would like to show you and come back to the slide. Contagion movie, many of you would have seen. Hello? Hello, sir. There is the video, audio is jarring. Hello, sir.
Yeah, okay. We can handle, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So Contagion is a movie that many of you would have seen. It is an American thriller that came in 2011, and it was directed by Steven Soderbergh. So its ensemble cast includes Marion Cotillard and Matt Damon. So all these people starred in that. And what did it speak? It spoke about the respiratory, the virus transmitted by respiratory droplets. We face the situation today. It's similar to that of Corona, the COVID period, that the pandemic period we are in. And this pandemic period also gave way for a lot of literary researches, like migration studies. Not only that, literary research is relevant to medical. Hello, shall I proceed? Medical studies, okay, I'm proceeding. So in case there is any disturbance, Professor, if you want me to stop, you tell me, I'll stop and then I'll continue from there. No issues. Okay, now I continue, Professor. Hope I'm audible and I'm continuing. So the plot concerns the spread of the virus transmitted by respiratory droplets. We also had a lot of Tamil movies, in fact, and there were memes about Surya starring films about locust and other things. How come these things have been already foreseen in a prophetic note? So how come a prophetic note happened with these media literature? So that is what. So a research can have, similarly, as you see in cinema that is happening today, your research can foresee an issue and it can very well help and address. So before even the issue comes up, the research can curtail the problem. The research can totally curb the problem before it comes. Y2K problem arose and people started working on it. So they foresee the problem. So they started putting an end to it. So similarly, a literature can foresee a problem and it can be redressed timely. So justifies the cause and effect. So this you can usually see in ELT research. There is a cause and a result, and you always, ELT people, what they do, they work on a target audience. They say, call it as a controlled group and an experimental group. They give certain tasks and certain set of programmed information would have been given to one particular group, and another group would be given with left with several other instructions, and they will try to analyze both the groups and the performance of both the groups, and the performance will be juxtaposed, and then they will arrive at a conclusion of their hypothesis. So this is where they go for a cause and effect justification of their research. And a literary research probes into the pros and cons and creates avenues for interdisciplinary investigations. When I say it probes into the pros and cons, the merits and demerits, and it talks about the interdisciplinary investigations, I would like to, here at this point, I would like to show you one particular video, and I'll share a video and then proceed with these 2 points. I stop sharing this screen. You need not panic. I'll show you a video, a small video clipping, just to explain these 2 points before I proceed with the entire schedule of today. Stay tuned with me. I'm just sharing it now. This is just a video clipping that you can see now. I'm playing it.
Are two pieces of dystopian fiction that are often spoken of in the same breath because in many ways they are mirror images of one another. The first depicts a world dominated by an invasive surveillance system where your every move is monitored and anyone who expresses a hint of dissent is routinely arrested and killed. Everyone worships Big Brother, their fictional dictator, and historical records are constantly changed. The second is about a society consumed by meaningless distractions, sports, pornography, casual sex, and when all of that doesn't work, drugs. The difference is memorably summarized by Neil Postman in the foreword to his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much information that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. In 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. What interests me about all of this is that while these two fictional societies are very different, the means by which they are created and maintained is the same. It's through the control of the media and, by extension, art. In recent years, there have been a few interesting studies into how stories, and novels in particular, can actually change the chemistry of your mind. The New School in New York City discovered that literary fiction enhanced a reader's sense of empathy. They tested this against both nonfiction and genre fiction, neither of which appeared to have the same effect. They theorized that characters in fantasy, science fiction, and other genre novels are more internally consistent and predictable, and as a result, result, a reader didn't need to flex their mental muscles to understand the characters. In literary fiction, however, characters are typically more nuanced and complicated, inviting the reader to figure out their motivations. Books are essentially a socializing influence. Not socializing, but socializing, as in books teach us about other people's emotions, allow us to build deeper bonds with them, and learn how to act in an emotionally intelligent way in society. In other words, reading literally makes you a better person. Another study conducted by Paul Zak at the Claremont Graduate School had participants watch a short film about a father whose son was dying of cancer. Blood tests revealed that participants had higher levels of cortisol and oxytocin after the experiment, which corresponded to feelings of distress and empathy. The findings show how when you read a book, watch a film, or hear a story, your body is reacting in the same way it would if the character's experiences were literally happening to you. Empathy, remember, is the ability to not just understand another person's feelings, but to share them as well. And that phenomenon is very threatening to a totalitarian regime. A dictator wants you to only be connected to himself. But literature is a conduit for you to connect yourself to the thoughts and feelings of the entire human race. In Orwell and Huxley's novels, the characters are systematically isolated from the rest of society by their governments because the regimes understand that the only way to exercise complete control is through isolation. And in both cases, this is achieved by a full-scale assault on all forms of art. In 1984, a lot of time is spent in the novel talking about how historical records are constantly revised, so that something that was true on Monday is suddenly treasonous on Tuesday. In fact, the novel is really about how a totalitarian regime can destroy the idea of truth. But less talked about is how, alongside this, art is also being revised and destroyed. And all of the new entertainment that society creates is designed to stir people into irrational rages. Here's the main character, Winston, describing what has become a film. Last night to the flicks. All war films. One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience, much amused by shots of a great huge Batman trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. I'll stop there, but the descriptions of the violence continue for another page, depicting the death of the fat man, a Jewish woman, and her child. The audience enjoys this gratuitousness, conditioned to celebrate the death of their political enemies. And so from our perspective, the characters that should receive our empathy in this situation, the victims, are denied that from the people in the theater. The constant repetition of violence has accomplished its goal. It has killed empathy. I mean, imagine what would happen to your mind if every movie you saw was a version of the war scenes in American Sniper. In Brave New World, the means are different, but the goal is the same. Instead of media that is oversaturated with violence, the media is oversaturated by sex. People in the novel spend their time at the feelies, which are pornographic films that include scent and touch receptors. The main character grew up outside of the regime called the World State and learned to read from the collected works of William Shakespeare. When he arrives in the World State, he is appalled by its frivolousness, and in a confrontation with a member of the ruling class, he argues that the world has lost something valuable. It's lost art. Othello's good. Othello's better than those feelies. Of course it is, the controller agreed, but that's the price we have to pay for stability. You've got to choose between happiness and what people used to call high art. We've sacrificed the high art. We have the feelies and the scent organ instead, but they don't mean anything. They mean themselves. They mean a lot of agreeable sensations to the audience. There really is no more damning piece of criticism of a piece of art than saying it is a lot of agreeable sensations to the audience. Trivializing the role of art in society is just one of the tactics used to achieve their goal of essentially destroying strong bonds between individuals. But it is an important part because it leaves the citizens of the world state completely ignorant about what they are truly missing out on. Their society is really good at keeping them content, inactive, and apathetic, and it obscures the real happiness that they could be experiencing. For decades, readers have looked to these novels and asked whether their current political circumstances resemble those in the books. It doesn't take much to draw a straight line from the thought police to the NSA, or from the feelies to any modern-day time waster. But if there are aspects of our society that feel comparable to those in dystopian fiction, then it should also be comforting that Orwell and Huxley have left us clues into how those regimes can be prevented. An empathetic and well-read population is the most terrifying thing imaginable to any real or fictional totalitarian regime. I think whether we're becoming less empathetic than we used to be is still up for debate, but what isn't is the fact that, as a whole, we are reading less than we once did. So if you're worried that the politics of your country has begun to resemble a dystopia, then your first act of resistance should always be to open up a...
So now I stopped sharing there. In fact, it is a big video, and I've stopped sharing there and to explain what I was telling you. Here in this video, we have watched three things I would like to tell you. One, we discussed about, the video discusses about dystopian fiction. When we speak about dystopian fiction, I'm sharing my screen now. I think you are seeing my screen. I come back to the last 2 points of this particular slide, probes into pros and cons and creates avenues for interdisciplinary investigation. So when we focus on interdisciplinary investigations, of course, we have been discussing, the video was discussing only about dystopian fiction, and it was talking about Orwellian dystopia and Huxleyan dystopia. And we also come across Kafka's dystopia, we come across Phil Dickens' dystopia. So today we speak about 4 different types of dystopia, and we speak about Orwellian dystopia, we talk about Huxleyan dystopia, and we speak about Phil Dickens' Dickian dystopia and Kafka's. So when we speak of all these things, apart from this, the video gave a clue that how this dystopian world literature, dystopian literature creates a kind of a biological change in the listener and the audience. Well, now if we start our research focusing on that particular aspect, how there are what kind of an endocrine changes or hormonal changes that happens while reading such kind of a dystopian fiction or watching such kind of a dystopian movie. If at all we start analyzing and exploring into it, it becomes kind of an interdisciplinary research, and it has, of course, a more kind of, you have more avenues into it. Now I move on to the research that we see. This is the source from where I have taken this chart is given beneath, and I see the literary research in these is very applicable and appropriate to this particular picture, and I have given you 2 pictures here to tell you how the research in literature we see qualitative research as well as quantitative research. So when we speak about qualitative research and quantitative research, we start working methodically, we start working on a particular theory, and we start working on the content analysis, we work on the entire content, we work on the history, we work on historical novels, we work on surveys, especially in sociological perspectives when you connect it with literature, and we work on ELT research, especially we make it experimental and action research, we make it when we go for a case study and things like that, and we go for ethnographic research also. So now let us take the entire literature. If you take the author's world and the author's life, you start exploring on that, it becomes a historical, or you go for a biographical, sometimes even an autobiographical research. Research you can pursue on autobiographical literature. Then when the work itself is taken for your research, what are the types of research you are doing? You work on the form of the research. When you work on the form of the research, when you go for the formalistic approach of the research, you go for the style, you go for the dictum, you describe about the language elements, you speak about dialogism, you speak about very many aspects into that, and you can interconnect with your formalistic ideas of literature, that any piece of literature that you take for your research. Then when you talk about the work itself, you can explore how the real world is shown. Here you sometimes know, you talk about mimetic art of literature. So what is mimesis in literature? Here we have to go back to Socrates and Plato once again when we speak of mimesis. When we speak of mimesis, it was actually Plato's the book Republica, from where I think it is 4th book or 10th book. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's 10th book. So there, Mimes is there. Plato gives an example. Plato, so Socrates speaks, I should say. So because Plato makes Socrates speak dialogues in that work, the Republic, there he speaks about mimesis, and mimesis is being condemned actually there. So why mimesis is condemned? Because they thought imitation is corrupt. So it totally corrupts. That nature is reality. When you speak about nature as reality, take nature itself as a bed. So when a carpenter comes to create a furniture, a cot, and that is a replica of the nature. So it is removed. It is second time removed from reality. So that is what Socrates says there. Then you somebody else comes, a painter comes. Say for example, a painter comes and paints the same cot. A painter will be painting the picture from one particular aspect, right? So whichever angle he stands and he looks at the picture or looks at the furniture, from that dimension only the painter will be able to paint. So it is removed again from the reality. So imitation, it is a kind of imitation. What the carpenter had done is also an imitation. What a painter had done here is also an imitation. That is what is being told. So in mimesis. So when you speak about mimesis, Socrates even gives, in Plato's Republic, we see another example also that you speak about the flute, and a person who is better person to talk about a flute. They, when an argument like that crops in, so there the person who creates a flute or the person who handles the flute, a flutist himself. So a flutist himself knows it better. He must be more genuine enough to make criticisms on that, because he knows the value of it. He knows how to make use of that. So that is why the imitation is being totally considered to be unreal and corrupt by the concept spoken here and by Plato. So that is where we come across mimetic and mimesis as an art in literature. So now we talk about feminism, we talk about Marxism, and we talk about symbolic. When you talk about symbols and you work on research and you work on archetypes, you can connect it with psychological aspects of that also. So you everywhere see, from here a reader response perspective, you can connect it to psychological. From an authorial life, you can connect it to psychological. What could have been gone into the mind of the writer? So that becomes a psychological perspective of the author. What could have been there? So that kind of research and intertextual researches. So these flowchart I picked up from Net to explore how we see research in literature today. So types of literature and research. I have to say thanks to William and Handy and Maxwell, William J. Handy and Maxwell, for having written a book called 20th Century Literary Criticism. So in 20th Century Literary Criticism, William J. Handy and Marx Westbrook sees criticism. They talk about 6 different criticisms. Based on that, I would like to speak on 6 different types of research that we can do in literature. So there, William Handy, excuse me, there William Handy talks about genre-based criticism, formalistic criticism, archetypal criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, historic criticism, and interdisciplinary criticism. So when we speak about genre-based criticism, what is the genre that we see in literature? We see short story, novel, novella, poem, drama, prose, so many things, right? So we work on a specific genre and we explore that particular genre, and we go by a methodical research. We take a theory and start exploring that particular aspect. We may go for a horizontal type of research or a vertical type of research. For example, if you're taking a Marxian theory and exploring a few novelists who from where you can cull out information for Marxian theory, that becomes a kind of a horizontal research with which you can explore. And a vertical research, you take a single writer and you explore an entire novel on one particular perspective, you call it as a vertical research. So here you can go for a genre-based research where you talk about, you can take a particular genre and start working on that. Even there you can specify yourself to, or you can stick on to one particular writer or writers. When you go for a horizontal, both are possible, I told you. Then formalistic research, I have already discussed in the beginning of the lecture that it talks about the structure, the entire form of the literature that has been created, the theme, the scene, the narrative. You talk about narratology today. So image, symbol, all those things. So these picture and stream into formalistic research. When you speak about archetypal research, it is a kind of critical theory that interprets a text by focusing on recurring myths and archetypes in the narrative, symbol, images, and character types in literary works. You go for archetypal research, and sometimes you go for psychoanalytic research. Here I would like to distinguish psychoanalysis with that of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is totally different from psychoanalysis. Sometimes scholars do confuse between psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. Psychoanalytic research is totally different from psychotherapy. You can go and explore. So explore personality organizations and the dynamics of personality development that guide psychoanalysis, a clinical method for treating psychopathology. That's why I've given this also. So there are kind of, I told you, Shakespearean example. So what kind of a psychotherapeutic, that is also a research. So psychotherapeutic is totally different from that of psychoanalysis. When you talk about psychoanalysis, you talk about Freudian theory, and Freud says that all the kind of ego, superego, he talks about, and there is a kind of an urge in your id to do certain things, and superego composes both the things, and the ego tells you, distinguishes between what is right and what is not right, and it suggests you a few better methods. For example, if you say, I have an urge for eating a pizza, immediately I go for a pizza, I feel like eating it. Oh, go eat, it says. Whereas ego says, no, it is not a right situation. You are doing a kind of a webinar now. You can see a pizza somewhere in the how somebody would have ordered and somebody would have brought, but you shouldn't eat a pizza now. So because my ego would tell that. So kind of making a distinction between all these things in the character analysis or in the text, that becomes a kind of psychoanalytic research, whereas psychotherapeutic is totally different. And I gave you that Shakespearean thesis example for a psychotherapeutic value. There you have a lot more things to explore. Historical research. When I speak about historical research, the entire world you can explore under history in the text and beyond the text. So you can associate with the histories, if at all I can say that, of nations, and then the history of nations, and you can make comparative study, and you can say that the historical elements with the help of theories that you have, right? You speak about historicism, you speak about new historicism, cultural materialism, and all those things. Then interdisciplinary research. This is real exploratory area. This has a scope also, but people do fear to tread into it. So exploration by conglomerating two or more subjects. You take literature and you take psychology. You make a psychoanalysis research. You take medicine and you try to find out the medical elements in literature. That's how medical humanities came into existence. So when you have very many fields like that, you can bring in neurology into literature. So how neurology is associated into literature. So we'll see, I'll show you one particular article for that in the course of my lecture for that neuroanalysis done in one of the works of the writer. I want to disclose the writer now. So now when we talk about genre-based literary research of 21st century fiction, I have taken some of the writers, 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami and 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. I think Bolaño is no now. So one Q84, you can call it as a dystopian novel, and you can explore for a Marxian perspective also in that. So it depends on what aspect you are going to concentrate on that particular novel. When you speak of a Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, this Storm of Swords is one of the 10 novels, third novel of the 10th quarter, I think, which was published, and it was published in sequels as Steel and Storm and Blood and Gold. So it was published in 2 quarters because it was very voluminous, and it was published in 2 volumes. So A Visit from Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, then Born Setter's Daughter by Amy Tan, White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi, and The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar. Some of the novels that came in 21st century writers on whom you can explore. And I have given it. This PPT will be left with the organizer after the end of this lecture. You can get it if you need to. Just take out the names of the novels and the novels. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. Till date, we explore so many things. You need not, you can, what not, you can explore everything in that, I can say. So you can speak about magic realism in Harry Potter. You speak about the dystopia in Harry Potter. You can, why not? You can even speak about Marxian perspective in Harry Potter. So many things, venues of research possible in Harry Potter. We are talking only about genre-based research now. That's why I'm talking about novels under genre. So the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and the Lincoln in Bardo by George Saunders, Looking for Alaska by John Green, Mother's Milk by Edward St. Aubin, Oryx and Craig by Margaret Atwood, Sag Harbor by Colson Whitehead, and Salode by Paul Beatty. Soon I Will Be Invisible by Austen, and Swamplandia by Karen Russell, and White Teeth by Zadie Smith. So characteristics, what are the characteristics that we could see in these fictions of 21st century? They demonstrate independence. They build a strong content knowledge. They respond to varying demands of audience, task, purpose, and discipline. They comprehend as well as critique. They value evidence. They use technology and the digital media strategically and capably. They come to understand other perspectives and cultures. So these are the characteristics and observations that we can find in 20th century fiction. So the technology, the advent of technology and what technology is doing today, all getting reflected in literature today, and how people are strategically using it and capably using it. This portion of the slide will definitely give you a clue of what I'm going to do now. So we were discussing about fiction so far, and I have pasted some of the great writers. So it will give you a clue about what I'm going to talk. I just scrolled slowly to show you. Okay, so we are going to see now about the poems, right? So they are poet laureates. Carol Ann Duffy, and she's now Simon Armitage succeeded her. So till May 2019, Carol Ann Duffy was the poet laureate. Before her was the Andrew Motion. And we know Ted Hughes was there, and we know we started with John Dryden, in fact. So now we speak about Simon Armitage today. You see Simon Armitage, you can also pursue works on the poems created by poems of these people, and you can work on the poems. And they are renowned, and they are poet laureates, and you can work on those poems of these people. Now, when we pursue your research, how do you pursue your research in literature? I would like to give a prescriptive capsule to pursue your research in literature. I see research can be pursued in three broader titles. One as methodical research, and second one as analytical research, and third one as thematic exploration. Many people take a fiction, they go for a theme analysis, they say, I would like to work on isolation as a theme. I would like to work on belongingness as a theme. So is that known for the quality? Is that a quality research? Let us ask ourselves. Let us see how easily and in an explorative way we can give a quality research. So methodical, when I say methodical, there has to be a strategy. In the beginning itself, we saw the quote of Shakespeare. It has to be a systematic, a disciplined school of thought, it should be. So when in that case, we need a systematic exploration. That's possible with theories. So when we go for a systematic exploration of a text, so I call it as a methodical research. It is easy to remember. If you see these blue letters, it is easy to remember as MAT. So I just made an acronym like that as a MAT research to make my scholars understand. So methodical, and it's following a particular, so a theory or to interpret a text. It probes into an approach. We speak about self-actualization today. We speak about what is a glass ceiling effect today. We speak about voyeurism today. So we have several theories and approaches with which we can explore into a piece of literature. So Wilbur Scott, here I would like to make a mention of Wilbur Scott, who saw this literary research under these titles called moral, psychological, formalistic, archetypal, sociological approaches. So Wilbur Scott was the person to say that you can interpret your text with with the prime importance giving to the moral principles of it, and the psychological aspect of it, and the formalistic component of it, and archetypal existence of it, and the sociological approaches to it. So Wilbur Scott has said this, so that way also you can get into. So under this, you can categorize your theories now. So theories that you could associate, sociological theories. Economical Marxism is we can categorize it both in sociology. We can categorize it mainly under economics. So because he talks about a base and a superstructure. When he talks about a base, it arises from a prime question: why a person who is manufacturing a product is not able to afford and buy the product that he manufactures? The question arises there. So he talks about the proletariat and he talks about the bourgeois. So when he talks about the bourgeois, even recently, many of you would have come across a webinar done by Gayatri Spivak Madam. There she talks about petty bourgeois politics. So even during this politics, during this COVID period, it was well explained by the right theorist, in fact. So she was talking about the leftists there. Now, right from the horse's mouth, we get information, right? So that is a very valid information. So what here I would like to connote here is, so we speak about such theories. We speak about Marxism, we say superstructure, and what are there are the 5 layers of superstructure, and how politics, literature, art, everything is part of it, but man whose base is always in the base level and he is not able to voice himself. So he is being promoted to ask for his rights. That's how communism existed, and we all know that. So here, when you explore it, the Marxian principle as an economic theory, you can explore Marxian theory, see Marxian theory as a sociological theory because it really reads about society. And similar to that, I was talking about self-actualization. Self-actualization, when you speak about self-actualization, you say that self-actualization, the beginning, the first layer, that is again given in a pyramid structure because many of the people lie in the downward, right? So that is the pyramid with a triangle which has a bigger base, right? So the bigger base comprises the main need, the basic need for food, the physical appetite as well as the appetite of the stomach, right? So the flesh, and let me distinguish like that. The appetite for the stomach and the appetite for the flesh has to be fulfilled, and then goes to the second layer. And the person who gets satisfied with that needs a shelter, and he wants the comfort to live in. And after he gets a shelter, what he thinks, he goes for a kind of, he wants to build up relationships. And when he wants to build up relationships, he will not stop with that. He wants luxury, and he wants, after building up love, relationship, everything, he wants a kind of luxury, and he wants to enjoy luxury. After enjoying luxury, he cannot keep quiet. He gives, diverts himself into literature, and he wants to enjoy. Entertainment comes into the picture. After attaining all these levels, finally, he's ready to accept what he is. I am like this. A kind of self-actualization crops in. Then I don't care what the society talks about me. Of course, I feel like doing this, let me do this. That sort of a temperament comes. So a kind of self-actualistic realization comes. So you talk about Maslow's self-actualization, and you associate it with literature today. So a kind of a methodical research that you speak. You take a text, and you take a theory and you value the text along with the notes of the theory that you do. Then you do a kind of an analytical research. When you do analytical research, Stephen Krashan, if you take Professor Stephen Krashan's work, there you can speak, there the professor talks, see, L1 learning is equal to that of L2 learning. It has to be equal, he says. So where if at all a person learns L2 with a different perspective other than that of L1, the person is not very successful in mastering the language. Of course, English is not our language, our mother tongue is different. But the way I speak Tamil, I should have the capacity to speak English. So how that can be developed. So there he makes a kind of an analysis how it has to be done, how the language acquisition, second language acquisition has to be done. So Stephen Krashan speaks about it. Well, now there you have tools, data, and style-based analysis that can happen, textual comparisons that can happen, then concept comparisons, case studies. Here you can, I would like to talk about Susan Masnick's translation release, right? So she, when we talk about translation, research and translation, you take two different language, literature created in two different language, make a comparison. That also can be pictured into a kind of analytical research because you need to make it very qualitative and quantitative.